So you were introduced to us by Jason Stahl.
I love Jason. His son and my son are friends from like 6 months old or so. One of those like mommy and me or my gym or something like that classes. So
So you've had a terrific education. You go to Princeton, and then you go on to law school, and at University of Virginia, a wonderful place, one of the prettier campuses I've ever had a chance to see. Both of them, frankly. And did you practice law?
I suppose technically I did. I took the bar, and I did a little bit of work, but I went to law school because I wanted to be Thurgood Marshall or Thomas Jefferson, and those jobs were taken. And I guess exactly.
And you had to be dead.
Yeah, exactly. Um, and I love the study of it. I love the idea of, like, how do people interact and bounce off each other and make rules and the theory more than the real practice, and, I guess I leaned in a little to my privilege of having a Princeton degree and a law degree and knowing that I could take some risks, I'd be okay. So I sort of
Yeah.
jumped off that path, my day job, if you will, for a little bit instead of, just being a server or a bartender only was, document review sort of. So technically I practice, but I never considered myself a lawyer.
So super well educated, grew up in great circumstance, which of course leads you after law to comedy.
Of course. Yeah,
It's a natural career
yeah,
path.
everybody's doing it. I will say for, listeners who may be parents that, my parents, to their credit, did not lose their minds about this choice. But I said something to my mom that to this day, she says the best gift I ever gave her. I said, I'm not always going to do exactly what you want, but your voice is always rattling around in my head. Right? And it's,
Indeed it is.
it's about statement of values and what's important and priority. And in your 20s, in my mind, is when you should take some risks. But yeah, it was not a traditional path.
So tell us about that career episode.
um, the episode lasted for a good 12, 15 years. Um,
Wow.
I there was a lot of reasons why I was interested in comedy, depending on how long you want me to lay on the therapist couch, but, it was connecting with people. It was, the raw challenge of it. Like, I moved to San Francisco, I was doing comedy there, and this was when Robin Williams started reappearing on the stand-up scene. And I remember watching Robin Williams go on stage, and for 5 minutes, he could do no wrong because he was Robin Williams, but after that, he had to be funny. And there
Yeah.
was something about, like, it wasn't where you grew up, it wasn't your degree, it was just, can you do the thing? That was a real challenge that I embraced in addition to, like, entertaining, talking about ideas, interacting with people and comedy as this tool for communication, that I found very powerful and have since applied elsewhere. I had some success in the business. Show business is not a great industry. You can make it big, but it's hard to make a living. I had a little pops here and there, TV stuff, this and that, and I loved it. Just as you mature and get a little less willing to live on chicken wings and late nights, and a few bucks here and there, I shifted what I was doing.
And, was it during that time that you met, Mrs. Kreisler?
It was actually I
So we know she has bad judgment.
She does, although the irony, I don't know if irony is the right word, maybe the beautiful thing about this being the podcast is that we weren't I don't know if we were officially dating yet, but she was also a performer, which made, our understanding of each other's sort of let's call it nuances, neurotic tendencies. She understood me and I understood her and then the challenges there, but I'm thinking in particular of a show that she performed in. It was a Jules Pfeiffer show. I can't remember the name of it now. She'll kill me for forgetting. But anyway, I came to the show still in the very early courtship, and I wanted to get some flowers for her, give flower after the show. But I was running late, so I didn't really plan ahead. And the only flowers was a giant bouquet, like I don't even remember what was in it, but it was huge. And I presented that to her afterwards, and apparently all of her castmates were so impressed by this like grand show of affection that she said, "Okay, I'll give him a shot." So there's your power of flowers right there, if nothing else.
Thank you very much. And, of course, you've continued that trend with super huge bouquets since then, right?
Yeah, but it's over time, over, 20 years. You add up all the flowers. I do believe in, the periodic, big bouquets. You probably know the expression better than I, but something to the effect of, buy flowers on a Tuesday. In other words, don't just wait
Yep.
for Valentine's and anniversary, but, like, show your affection at other times because, it's
It's so easy to do, but so
yeah,
important. And, now there's, more than 1 child? You
2
mentioned,
kids,
1.
2 kids,
Yeah.
doing well, they're kids, so it depends on when you ask me. Are you asking me at, 3:30 in the morning or at 5 in the afternoon? 5 in the afternoon,
Uh-huh.
I love them. I get to go home and make dinner for them in a little bit, but 3:30 in the morning, maybe
Well,
different.
I'm at a much later life stage. I have 7 grandkids, and, wait till you get there. It's a wonderful club, and it's worth joining, but you have a long way to
Dreams
go
far
before
off,
you get
indeed,
there.
indeed.
And so tell me how you transitioned out of your comedy career. You started writing,
Yeah,
books too, and you got to work with a guy I'm a big fan of, Dan Ariely, and, you wrote a clever book together.
yeah.
Tell us about that.
So,
How'd you and Dan meet?
in my comedy career, I had the good fortune of meeting someone who was the, an editor at, a website called TheStreet.com, which is like Jim Cramer, the Mad
Sure.
Money guy, his financial website. And he said, "Hey, you're a smart guy. You're a funny guy. You wanna write about the business news, a humor column about business." I said, "That sounds like a terrible idea." He goes, "We can pay you." I said, "It sounds like a great idea." So, I did that, and there wasn't it was no one was really doing that at the time. I developed a following, which got me an opportunity to write, my first book, which is a satire. I wanna be very clear, a satire called Get Rich Cheating. It was how to be, a steroid user like Lance Armstrong, or how to be Enron or Bernie Madoff, and, I was
Or, you did mention God in your material there, how he cheated too.
yes, he did. What was he worked, for 6 days and called it a week, took the 7th day off.
Invoiced for
Exactly,
7.
that's what it was. Thank you for catching that. Um, it was a lot of fun. It was research to a certain extent, but what happened is that Dan Ariely got a copy of this book, and he was doing his research on dishonesty at the time, and he appreciated the approach. He had me come lecture to his class, at Duke University. I did it in character, pro cheating, which is its own experiment to see how, MBA students responded to, "You can make money if you don't have ethics." Most of them were against it for what it's worth. Uh,
I hope so.
and this was my exposure to the field. Like, I had never even known this was 2009. I never knew that behavioral science was a thing. Um, but in retrospect, it made total sense for me because I didn't connect with traditional study of law or economics. I could pass all the exams, get good grades, but I was like, this isn't how people act. Like, people don't act rationally. You don't go shopping and the milk is 10 cents more than the supermarket down the road. So you go to the other supermarket. You're dealing with real life and you're in a hurry. And so behavioral science, as we may get into more, is basically about how real people make decisions. And it's not just a cost benefit analysis. It's not always rational. And it was like a light bulb moment for me. I love the field, and for some reason, Dan had, he liked my vibe, as the kids might say, or he connected to my style. And we did a few projects together. And then I guess it was 2013, 2014. He asked if I wanted to work on a book with him that I guess, he didn't have time for, or whatever it was. And that book we published in 2017 called Dollars and Cents. And it's in 22 countries. It's fantastic.
Wow.
All thanks to Dan. I will say I'm not much of a negotiator, but this is my negotiation success. On the cover, it says Dollars and Cents, Dan Ariely and Jeff Kreisler. Um, and Dan Ariely's name should be bigger, deserves to be much bigger. I worked hard to get my name to be bigger than the word and. Nonetheless, I mean, and we could talk more. The book was it just really struck a chord with me when Dan basically said, "Here's like this whole field, dig in, we'll talk about it." Again, I sort of was applying my skills that I honed through comedy and other writing that I've done of communicating what can sometimes be scary ideas, certainly complex. Like money can be frightening to talk about, and then we don't really talk about. We talk about what we buy, we show off our clothes and our cars, but the other stuff can be a challenge, and we used a little bit of humor and this research to shed light on some of the challenges we all face, from falling for sale prices and brand names to planning ahead. And um, it was a great experience. I love having written books. I don't always love writing books. It can be a hard process.
Mhm.
But I'm thankful that Dan had faith in my ability to add something to his value because, as you know, Dan himself is a pretty entertaining guy. It's not like he's a
For sure.
dry, boring professor. He's already dynamic. So it was.
And all the work he's done around what I would call the paradox of
Mhm.
choice and how it weaves its way through everyday life. Everything you look at has these choice mechanisms in it, and basically what I boil his down to, give me more than 3 choices, I'm
Yeah.
paralyzed.
Yeah. I mean, there's, option paralysis or choice
Mhm.
overload is one of the things, and it's just fascinating to see how things are structured. Sort of, I look with the benefit of hindsight. I see in my career that get rich cheating is this is how other people have sort of cheated you, and dollars and
Uh-huh.
cents is a bit like this is how you cheat yourself, right? This is the
Mhm.
traps you fall into. So, my a bit of my delusion is through it all. My body of work is like we can't change human nature. We can't change the flawed creatures that we are, but if we can recognize where we trip up or where we excel and why, then we can try to like create systems or nudges or whatever it is so that we make fewer mistakes and more good choices. Uh,
I know in terms of choice, I always point out to people because, one time I was in a bar, just once, and, happened to be working there, and I said, "Did you ever notice that when you walk into a bar, there's 3 shelves, and the bottom shelf is, give me a vodka and soda, I don't care what the label says. Middle shelf is a popular price, and then there's some people who are just top shelf people." And working as a bartender, especially with young people places that I would work in 100 years ago, you'd get the guy who comes in, he's with a girlfriend, she's a new
mhm.
girlfriend, at least she's a date, and, "I'll have the Johnny Walker Blue, please." And it was very easy to see, that they were just wearing
Right.
their, uh, their choices on their sleeve about how sophisticated and how money doesn't matter to them, and it's just and after they've had a couple, you could always say, "The fellow at the other end of the bar there sees you drinking this," and he says, "He doesn't think you can tell the difference between that and a top shelf and a middle shelf." Now, he's already had 2 or
Sure.
3, and you start lining up the 50s or the 20s or 100s, whatever it is under the glasses, and you just take 'em every
Yeah.
time. But we do wanna strut our stuff. It's in everything we see and do every
Yeah.
day, whether it's the labels on the clothes we wear, what sneakers we wear. Now there's a couple of Nike's having trouble with a couple of, sneaker brands that are even cooler and more
Yeah.
distinct, and
And it's
it's
a
just
it's a it's a challenge because there is a value to maybe getting the most expensive ones, right? To try and like it feels that maybe you're learning that it's not just a purely irrational, but when you do it for reasons that you might say don't have as much value, like just to show off, that's
Mhm.
that's the problem. When you just spend on the brand just because, and then other things will give you as much value, like you're if you're at a fancy French restaurant, you're gonna probably buy that nice expensive wine that maybe, isn't you wouldn't buy in the wine store because it's part of the whole experience.
Sure. Tell us, Jeff, the transition,
Yeah.
you have a dozen years or so in your entertainment, career. You then team up with Dan Ariely, and, write these books together, which has gotta be a great experience because the chemistry, the learning process of working on a team like that must be extraordinary. I know for me, the book I did last was with a partner who was a really smart guy, and there was so much joy in the journey, and such a learning experience for me to learn from this fellow. His name is, Dr. George Everly down at Johns Hopkins. So I have a sense of what that's like. Then how did this opportunity with JP Morgan come about where you take all the things you've been doing observationally in your comedy entertainment career, where you're looking at human behavior, and you take your education, your background, the learning as a researcher in the entertainment world, and how does that happen? I think it's such a smart and good idea for you and certainly for the private bank at JP Morgan to say, "We want someone who can help us understand our behavior
Yeah.
from an analytical point of view and how, if with awareness, we can make better decisions."
Well, thank you. I like to think they made a good decision too. um, what happened was I said that this behavioral science sort of clicked for me as an aha moment. And I knew as the approach of the publication was gonna happen that I would get what I refer to as like a pop. Certainly being
Yes.
entertainment, content creator, whatever your term of art, you have these moments where you get attention. I was like, I wanna seize on this. I'm getting older. I've got a kid. Um, And I really believed in the potential for it to help individuals, families, communities, organizations. Um,
Sure.
and I also, this may be a little making an excuse, but in show business, I was never about promoting me. Like I didn't need to be famous. I just wanted to do the thing. And suddenly
Yeah.
I had content that wasn't just look at me and how funny and special I am. It was look at this stuff that's super
Useful.
cool and helpful.
Yeah.
So I leaned into that and I found a way to start doing speaking events like keynote speaking. I do a ton of that, still do consulting, writing. Had an
I've seen some tapes of your keynote is you're terrific.
thank you.
I mean, you deliver a great message, you do it in an entertainment way, because of your professional background, that ability to tell a story is just
Yeah.
essential.
I sometimes say I found it easier to be the funniest smart guy than to try to be the smartest funny guy. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like,
Well well done.
there's a lot. So I wish I cracked the code earlier, but whatever. You can't. Life is a beautiful journey. Um, so I do all these things, and I also help run a website, which unfortunately has been hacked and taken down. It's called People Science, and it was about the facilitating the conversation between researchers like Dan and others, and the growing field of interest in actually applying this in nonprofits and also
Mhm.
in private industry. And I just became a voice there, and I had a media presence because of whatever either my unique skills or the timing. This is a field that even now is still emerging into practice. And I also always thought like, hey, this would be a great opportunity for me to be able to do more, not just talk about it. And then during the pandemic, and I if I was quicker, I'd show you my pandemic hair at the time. I hadn't cut it for a while. It was huge. Uh, JPMorgan reached out and they said we have an opportunity here, and I thought it was come give a talk because I give talks to a
Yeah.
lot of, but it was they had an interest in behavioral science and what it could be. And particularly like I work in the wealth management space, financial advice. So
Mhm.
it's not retail and credit cards. It's more like planning. It's more like the stuff that
Yeah.
is really hard to plan for your retirement and your future and make decisions. And they recognize that so much of their work is coaching. It's about understanding people's goals. It's about that human relationship element. And yet the financial industry as a whole didn't always lean into that. They lean into the technical and
Well, it
technical
would
stuff.
seem to me that makes so much sense, Jeff, because if you're gonna be advising me on my wealth issues, how to protect money, earn money, and you have to get to know
Yeah,
me and know my motivations and know my family situation and my business situation. You really need to understand me to be your most effective as a wealth manager,
absolutely.
as an advisor.
And what I found here and elsewhere is that the successful advisors, they know that even if they don't call it behavioral science, but it's not necessarily
Mhm.
institutionalized. And so they looked to me and I'll be honest, they didn't exactly know what this would be. And I laid out as part of the benefit of my work on this people science website was talking to all these different companies and organizations that apply behavioral science and picking up best practices. And I said, hey, this is a great opportunity. Here's what I would do. Here's how what I would build, and let's see if we can do it. And I was fortunate to fit into an organization that valued it's called the thought leadership and communication aspect of it to sort of build
Mhm.
the support for it that I didn't have to fight. There was support for the idea. And I'm coming up on 5 years now, so I like to think I kept that support. And building the process and it resonates with people. And it still feels like behavioral science is still early in its emergence as a force within industry. But everybody I've talked to for in cross different companies and industries sort of gets it. Right? They may not have thought about it before, but you say to someone, like you just said, you have to understand your customer, right? Or your employees. You have to understand where they come from and why. Like I could be an advisor and I present to you, hey, this is an amazing deal in commercial real estate. No doubt about it.
Mhm.
But if your father or mother lost everything in commercial real estate 10 years ago, it doesn't matter. But that's you. That's not the thing. And it's about focusing on you and what your concerns or your things that you're excited about. And so I feel like it's I'm not here as a commercial for my company, but I feel like I've helped sort of superpower a bit of their strengths already.
October is National Disability Employment Awareness Month, a time to celebrate people of all different kinds of abilities. This year, Smile Farms gathers for our 10th annual gala here in New York City at the Ziegfeld Ballroom. It's a wonderful time to celebrate 10 years of creating wonderful work and job opportunities and brighter futures. I invite you to join us. Visit smilefarms.org to be part of this wonderful celebration. Help us prepare for the work that lies ahead.
Um,
One area you must get involved in, Jeff, is the area of philanthropy.
mhm,
And we've spent some time with the Milken Institute in the last several years, and they have a big, big focus on philanthropy and advising philanthropic activities, foundations, families, because they feel so much is wasted. I know one term I picked up from them was the grateful patient syndrome.
mm,
So the fellow who has cancer and he's in Minnesota and he's well taken care of by his local oncologist, and he saves him, and he's a wealthy individual, and he says, "Let me reward him by giving him $100 million to build a research center." And the Milken people would tell you that's the worst thing you could do because you're only gonna be spending money on things where you don't need to be. It isn't going to advance the science as quickly as if you pooled your resources with all of us, and you go to the best, of centers, and you know what's already been done in every other place, so their concern is about how much waste. But I would imagine with the, well-accomplished folks that would be customers of the private bank and the wealth management activities at JPMorgan, that philanthropy is
yeah,
a pretty regular topic. And how do you look at the behavioral motivations on
sure.
philanthropy? Because I imagine they're pretty varied.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I do partner. We have something a team here called the Philanthropy Center that advises
Mhm.
folks on their philanthropic giving. For it advises clients, and it is varied. And when I was thinking about this podcast, I thought of that because there is like a real science and emotion to giving. That the allocation of our funds for philanthropic endeavors is more about the personal goals and needs and emotions than the other part, right? Like, I wanna, I need 7% return on my risk-taking portfolio with this. Like, that's not the same as I want to cure cancer because my grandfather, grandmother, or, it's so personal on its surface. And I've really been pleasantly surprised by the fact that, when we talk with folks, it's not like the different motivations. There's a little bit of like, let's have some tax savings and be tax smart, and that's why the professionals here know to do that. But that's not the driving force. Some of
No,
the decisions are like, what's going to make me feel good? And as I'm sure you're aware, like giving to others, being pro-social, doing for others really matters to folks. And I don't have any hard data on this, but one thing I've observed is that folks that have accumulated significant wealth want to feel like they didn't just get a number in their bank account, but they've like accomplished something of significance. And if part of that is funding cancer research, fantastic. Some people, they want their name on the building, right? Or they want a big gala with awards. Some don't. They want it to be anonymous. It's about doing the thing.
it's varied
Yeah,
motivations, right?
and again, understanding the personal motivations, whether you're the nonprofit trying to raise money, you're the advisor trying to help them figure out the efficient vehicle to do so, or you're the family itself or individual, him or herself, who's like, "I wanna give," but they get stuck. It's like, what's gonna get you over the hump? Is it, you're part of one of those thermometers that has the fundraising goal and you can get it
Sure.
over the top? Is it a big award ceremony? Is it a thank you note from like a kid who you helped fund their school and they tell you like how it changed their lives? All these different
Mhm.
things make a difference. There's some just want to write the check. Great. There are others that like
Yeah.
love to feel like they're having an impact on the world, which is sort of to your point. Like there is often a frustration about inefficiencies because people want to know that there's that impact there.
Yes.
And it's been one of the areas here that I found most rewarding is talking to folks because then you get them out of their, like, number game and into their passion, right? We started a family
Mhm.
foundation, for homeless animals because my son found a dog on the road, like, it could be as small as that blows up into a multi-million-dollar thing, and I
Yeah.
love connecting and that they light up when it's about giving to others and helping others.
Well, one thing I know that JP Morgan does, I think is very smart, is they focus on the next
Mhm,
generations. And, there's not much you can do for people who, give them another, JP Morgan tote bag isn't gonna really change their life. But you get my kids or my grandkids involved where they meet other people and they develop global relationships, and, they start to think about the world in a different way. They start to think about, well, maybe mom and dad weren't just, lucky people and maybe they were part of something bigger, then you're really making a difference in those clients' lives, especially as they get older and they have multi-generations. I'll tell you, we started a charity almost 10 years ago, next year, 10 years, called Smile
Mhm,
Farms, and our effort there is, selfishly, I'm the oldest of 5 children. I have a middle brother who was born developmentally disabled, lives in a wonderful group home here on Long Island where we live. He's very much a part of our family. But the fellow who started the agency that my brother's, group home is a part of, called Connection, Kinexion, is a fellow named Walter Stockton, and he came to my younger brother, Chris, and I. Chris, 10 years my junior, the youngest, Kevin, my brother with developmental disabilities, and he suggested we start this charity, Smile Farms. And, we bought some land, we built some greenhouses. It was all about creating work opportunities for people who weren't gonna find jobs
mhm,
anywhere, and my brother being one of them. He couldn't find jobs for any of his people in the community, so we started doing that. We have about 600 people working now. But the benefits beyond the impact we're having on those 600 people that I didn't anticipate, and I so much enjoy and relish now is here at the flowers companies to see all the young people that we're told are selfish and self-centered and didn't want to work hard. We have a fundraiser tomorrow. We have 40 volunteers signed up to do registration and everything. I get to know them at a different
yeah,
level and it fast tracks those relationship developments. And you see all these young people take their own time off to come do something for somebody else, and then they bring their friend to volunteer, and then their friend winds up working here because he or she's attracted to the mission. And then from a family point of view, we just recently had a meeting with, the management of Smile Farms talking about the future, how can we grow? And we had a lot of people in person, but a lot on Zoom too, of the next generation. So my kids, my sister's
mhm,
kids, and, uh so ranging from, early 20s to mid-40s, uh, all on a call talking about how can we shape the future, how can we make it bigger, how can we impact more lives. I was so happy that night to see the next generation picking up
yeah,
the torch here,
yeah,
and so those kinds of benefits, it helps our family to be better in the sense that, everyone knows they're part of something bigger, which I think is really important. And, that keeps the cousins together even if they're
mhm,
not together geographically. It keeps them realizing they're part of a family and they have responsibilities. So I imagine that's what you get to work with families on all the time, not just the how do we structure this properly for best tax advantages and to preserve the most wealth that can go toward the cause, but that's gotta be exciting and stimulating for you to be involved in those discussions and know that you're making a
yeah,
difference.
absolutely, and you hit on some very common and important things, and this idea of it providing family unity at a certain level, right? As families grow, you're not gonna keep everyone together on everything, but if you have a shared sense of values and mission and do these things together, that's the stuff that keeps a thread alive throughout the generations, and, I also find I get asked a lot, "What's the difference between millennials or Gen Z and us old us old folk?" Um, and my and my general response is like people are the same, like the raw materials of us and the underlying, motivation, everything the same. However, younger generations now have access to not just the tools and technology, but like the acceptance of pursuing something beyond just personal gain and beyond just you know accumulation of wealth. Not that that was always the case for us older generations. I'm Gen X. Um, and it often manifests itself, and as you said, you put out a call for, "Hey, let's do an event," and you get 40 people because they see, like, "Hey, there's a value in being," whether it's the community aspect with my friends or it's the impact, and I think it's wonderful that, it can be a challenge for people that manage younger employees because they sort of demand
Mhm.
something more than just a salary, but I think on the whole, it's a benefit because people recognize that, like, what they do and how they spend their time really should matter and provide value to them, which is often derived from value to their communities.
Halloween is creeping up, and Cheryl's has just a trick to make it a spooktacular success. Scary good treats that'll make your little monsters but scream for more. Conjure up wicked Halloween fun with Cheryl's cookies. Are you officed in the new building yet?
I am. I am one of the guinea pigs. I moved in last week. I'm not a commercial real estate. In the end, I'm in an office talking to talking to a screen. But it's if you got to go into an office, it's a pretty nice one.
Pretty amazing, I hear.
Yeah, it's great.
It's interesting, when they decided to do that, that they went with a big name architect and did something really different, and how they built that building over Grand Central and the rail and the subway, just engineering wise must be amazing, but it's a beautiful building. I mean, it's not just a replacement of the tower that was there. It's a beautiful statement.
Yeah, and it's got all the bells and whistles you could imagine. I probably will get, like, some sort of electric zap from Jamie Dimon directly if I say much more. But I think we're all those of us that moved in are all very happy here.
You're still tethered to that zapper, huh?
Exactly.
So in the fun work that you get to do, tell me some of the things that surprise you most about working with affluent clients.
Um, I don't know if it's a surprise as much as a pleasant affirmation. I despite the occasional, evidence to the contrary, I go through my life believing people are good and well-intentioned, um, and I think that that's true all the time. People in groups might be a different conversation, but in general, people are well-intentioned and wanna provide for themselves and their family and their community, and I've been pleasantly surprised how very true that is, even, up and down the wealth spectrum, and how many clients there are that might have very, very significant wealth and feel, a responsibility that isn't born out of guilt, but actually born out of, um a true desire to share their fortune, and I don't mean their fortune in a number, but their fortunate fortune, um, with
Mhm.
others and to provide opportunity. And I think that, like, if you get caught up in too much of sort of, stereotyping of the super wealthy, there can be a sense that, like, that's not the case. Oh, there's always exceptions that prove the rule. But for the most part, everybody that I've worked with, and maybe this is self-selecting because they're speaking with the behavioral scientists, but they want to, they recognize this stuff is hard, making good financial decisions and plans, and they want to figure out the best way forward for themselves and their families and their communities.
I know I've been very, very lucky in my life, and business has been successful, but I laugh at myself on the cheapness on certain things that I'm growing up not so rich has left its scar tissue around me, and my kids and grandkids are quick to point it out to me.
Yeah. Look, that's a common. I mean, I remember, even when I was younger with my own family, like, we didn't grow up wealthy, we grew up upper middle class. We took family
Sure.
vacations, but I remember we went on some family vacation. I had no idea what the number was, but I'm sure it cost quite a bit. Um, and I remember my one of my parents was arguing over, like, basically $1 on some, like, a taxi ride or something like that, and it's like, you let the big things go, but you try to control the other little things, and whether that's a remnant of growing up, in more scarcity or just so there's a lot going on there, so it's very common. Um,
And in my family, when we gather for holidays and stuff, and that topic comes up, the next generation is quick to point out to the 5 of us all little peccadillos in terms of being thrifty.
yeah,
You waste money over here, but the paper towel you dried your hand with, you laid it out so it dries off so you could use it again.
yeah. My move around the wet I do, I make sure that I shake off when I wash my hands at home, I shake it off to get rid of as much water as I
Sure.
can before I waste my napkin to pick this out.
Well, the whole idea of a paper towel would not have existed in my household as a kid. Who could afford paper towels?
Although I will say as a parent who's not I'm removed from the diaper years, but the idea of not like, disposable diapers are, probably bad for the environment, but that's an improvement from the non-disposable.
If you were teaching a course, and I suppose you do, on, financial literacy around behavioral analytics to your clients, what kinds of things do you want on the final exam for them?
Um, One thing that I have seen repeatedly, and I suffer from this myself, and it almost goes to what we were just talking about with the financial peccadillos. Up and down the wealth spectrum, depending on the types of decisions, is people tend to spend a lot of time and energy and stress on the small decisions when they should think about the big ones, right? You're doing a home renovation for a couple $100,000, and your contractor says for $5,000 you can get a marble countertop, and you're just so overwhelmed. You're like, fine, it's dropping the whatever. Then you go to the supermarket and you spend 10 minutes staring at organic tomatoes for 15 cents a pound more, right? And it's just like we do that like for very like sense of control or relativity, whatever it is, and I don't want to create. a world of people that are stressed and trying to like freak out about every decision. Instead, say, you know what, let the 15 cents go. Let, Susie Orman's don't buy your $5 latte. Let that go. Check in now and then and worry about where you're going to go to college and the home you're going to buy and the car you're going to finance and like the big ones. And yeah, that's hard. Those are overwhelming. But like that's where you should put your energy because those are decisions that make the big difference. And you overpay for something by $100,000 in your 20s, that's gonna hurt you a lot more than overpaying for a dollar coffee every couple days. And I think
So as a as a guy who, was, been blessed to have, be able to get into great schools and go to great schools and graduate from them, what do you think of, and I'm gonna introduce the AI topic here because this was a hot topic, in my circles over the weekend. What impact will AI have on education? And what is it doing to the value prop? Because I was just with a friend, over the weekend who was his, son's making, about to make a big decision this year about what colleges to go to, and I was shocked to hear, Bucknell University in, Pennsylvania up to $100,000 a year, and another college, maybe it was Elon in North Carolina, was telling me it was 55,000.
yeah.
What's the value prop?
So, I'm not an expert in higher education, but I will tell you that I think that there are.
But you're going to
Yes, I
be.
will for the next 2 minutes. And I will be when my children are getting knocking on the door. Um I think it's a challenge for educational institutions to figure that out, AI or not. But I particularly think in the context of AI, because to me, and I'm fully aware of how biased I am by my own upbringing experience, but to me, the education wasn't about learning the state capitals and the country capitals. It was about learning how to think, about how to be
Yes.
given something new and figure it out. Even if you look at my choice to pursue comedy, like part of it was because it was so hard. I
Yep.
relish that. I know not everyone's the same. But then I look forward for our kids, broadly speaking, particularly as AI makes so many of the what's the state capital tools like easy, right? 5 years ago, you're guaranteed work if you know how to code. Now that's gone.
Yep.
I think our kids are gonna.
And that's amazing to
Yeah,
me.
it's I mean, and who know the rate of change, there's always been change, but the
Change like
rate of
that.
change is so accelerated. And I believe that our kids are gonna need to have some basics. One is basic skill. One is flexibility, and the ability to learn new things because we can't predict what any of the world's gonna be like in 5, 10, 15 years. Um, and then there are the interpersonal things, the things that will remain: emotional intelligence, empathy, communication skills, leadership. Things that I could be wrong, computers can take someday, but they feel like they're still remaining in the human experience. So if a college or a class in high school, like, can teach these sorts of skills, the resiliency, that's where I think the value is. Now, can you learn that in another context? If you're a crafts person and you can learn resiliency throughout, sure. Um, and so I'm kind of, I know I'm not answering the question about college, but when I think about the skills that are so vital, that is when I think ahead to the scary time when I'll be looking at schools with my own children. Like, is that what we're teaching, or are they just saying we get good test scores, or are they teaching you how to like think and how to like be confronted with a world that's rapidly changing, that is full of disinformation, that is full of different like incentives, that like, are you able to figure your way out in the unknown? Because as I said, I think that's going to be so vital, and you can see how people struggle, right? I don't want to get too far down the hole, but as industries have changed, whole communities that are built around an industry have trouble recovering because it is hard to
Very much so.
adapt. It is hard to change, and there's no blame to be laid anywhere except to recognize like that's going to be a continuing challenge for workers at every level of the economy.
My buddy and I were talking to a young man yesterday who just graduated from a state university, and we asked him, he studied business and finance, and we asked him if he'd taken any courses on AI. He said, "No, they didn't offer
Mm,
any courses, not a single course on AI." And we thought, both he and I said to one another later, we think he got cheated a bit
yeah.
because at this point in time, if you're not learning at all about AI, but we both felt like there was a movie when we were younger called The Graduate with
Mhm.
Dustin Hoffman, and Uncle, Murray, I think it was, comes up to him
Yeah.
and tells him, "Plastics." And I said, "You and I are Uncle Murray." My friend's name is Steve. "You and I are Uncle Murray because 'cause we're telling this young man, AI, AI," but we believe it.
I look, it'll be fascinating to see how, because will this settle down and it's just sort of, a leap of like supercomputing, right? That we can do stuff, or does it genuinely change everything? I don't know. My belief is it's going to be a tool.
Well, your dad was a physics professor, and what happens when an LLM learns everything that's been written and published and learned about physics to date?
That's a good question. I don't know that an LLM can teach a class full of 18-year-olds about momentum.
But it might be able to do some problem solving that we don't have the capability to do now because we don't have the compute.
Yes. I,
And look how it's gonna change your old profession, the law profession.
sure.
I
It
mean
already is. Reviewing documents used to be what you did for your first few years in a law firm.
right,
And now that made that this is where it will be interesting is as a tool, what is the interaction between AI and the people that are using the tool? Right? AI produces a diagnosis and gives it to a doctor. Does that doctor automatically distrust it because she's been practicing for 30 years? Or does that doctor say, yeah,
right.
I'm excited for the support? And then how does that evolve? And
Or they can probe further now, it's not just, finite.
they can use their
I know I
brain.
witnessed one time, I was at an event in Orlando, Florida, at a place called Lake Nona, which is a city being built within the city of Orlando, and, there were some people on stage from IBM, and they had a diagnostic tool, and they were working with, a doctor/professor slash professor from Harvard Medical School who had built a network of 240 pediatricians from around the world. So if you're a pediatrician, you have a case and you cannot get to a diagnosis, you could submit an application to this global team, and they would select your cases and try and review it to see if they could come to a diagnosis. And they were finding a diagnosis in 30% of the cases. After they used this AI tool and they set it on top and just loaded it completely with all their learnings and educational materials and research, they moved that from 30% to just over 50%. And they talked about how many thousands of lives that was
Mhm.
changing. Now, this is 2 years ago, so Lord knows what's happened to it, that diagnostic tool since, but I did hear someone last week say, I think it was Dr. Peter Diamandis talking about, we will all have access to a diagnostic tool for free online within 24 months
Yeah.
that he said is as good or better than any doctor we go to see today. That's boy, the pace of change is quickening.
Yeah. And on that particular note, I haven't heard that exact story, but I often think about, people that they have a cough, they Google their own symptoms, and they always say, "Don't Google because you're always gonna it's always gonna be like bubonic plague or something horrible." But if AI can get,
Now you haven't done that? You haven't Googled your symptoms?
I'm not the cobbler's kids have no shoes or whatever the expression. Um, but yeah, if we can get closer to more accurate diagnoses, if you will, that'd be wonderful. I still, and this is my old man saying plastic saying, like, I still want to make the connection with the person. And if that person, that doctor is aided by this, if I can come in more fully equipped instead of saying I Googled on, you know, crazyperson.com and thought I had bubonic plague, but actually like I use this tool that's recognized, what can we do about, like, what should I be afraid of? Like, how do I talk about this with my family? Like all these other elements. I still believe there's a space for that human interaction and connectivity and understanding. And I also recognize I am so fully biased because that's what I do that I'm secretly telling myself there's always going to be a need for Jeff Kreisler. But I do as much as I can.
But look at the work you do and the foresight that the leadership of the private bank there had in saying, "Hey, Jeff, let's talk about this new role," because as you said, early on, foundationally for us, what makes us happiest, what makes us fulfilled, what gets us up in the morning is
Mhm,
relationships of all different kinds. It could be your day-to-day relationship with your familiar barista where you're wasting a couple of $100 a week in Starbucks, or could be, uh, it could be a relative that you haven't seen in a while and you reconnect with those very, very important relationships. But for the private bank to say, "We want a behavioral scientist here who can do the analysis, point out to us the silly things we do,
mhm,
enter into a real dialogue where we can laugh at ourselves or take note of something or develop a sense of our own biases and how to correct for them." That's an investment in
mhm.
relationships. That's an investment in knowledge.
Yeah. Well, as I think I said before, I consider myself fortunate that they had some foresight. And you asked earlier about what's surprising, and I talked about the clients, but even the advisors, I'll say I'm pleasantly surprised advisors here, almost all of them, they are relationship people. They're people, right? They wanna help people solve problems, and I think from a distance, I'd say, "Oh, they wanna come and make money." That's part of it. Let's not pretend it's not great to
They wanna have a good career, no
right.
question.
But ultimately, what drives them is helping families, individuals, companies solve problems, de-stress, feel better, and move forward and pursue their goals. Goals that obviously we're a bank are often financial, but nonetheless, it's helping people. And hopefully, knock on wood, I can help them sort of lean into those best instincts and desires that they have. But it's certainly this whole industry is much more of a relationship driven than I think I thought of before I joined it.
And I understand you wrote Jamie's speech where he talked about the value of five-day work week in the office, I understand.
And once again, the electric shock machine is warming up in the background, so I'll say I'm very
By the way, I love that. That was terrific. I know he didn't leak it himself, but it it just put a smile on a lot of our
yeah,
faces.
I love my job and providing for my family, so I have nothing more to say on this.
So now how, tell us how you divide your workload up. Is it a lot of speaking, a lot of public speaking, a lot of, interacting with clients?
It's sort of 3 pillars is the way I think of it. There's a client engagement where I speak at events or with clients or write articles to sort of talk about like, none of this stuff is a secret. We're not tricking anyone. It's
Ye
like, "Look,
mhm.
these are the things that make it hard for us to plan for retirement or to give to philanthropy or just, talk about money with our kids." Um,
Or the people just not confronting real issues that they need to think about.
yeah, I mean, I've spoken with folks that have significant amount of money that don't have an estate plan. They know they should do it. There's no doubt about it, for financial and other reasons, but they just don't wanna deal with it for reasons
Yeah.
from, obvious reasons. They don't wanna think about my mortality or anything. Um, and so it's, that level of like, you know, this is common, this is normal, that's okay. Let's work on it. And then another pillar is working with our teams, our advisors to sort of empower them. They're not gonna become psychologists or behavioral scientists but like become the best version of what they do to recognize, hey, a client just sold their business for a gajillion dollars or they're thinking about it. The numbers are great, but they're hesitant. What's going on there? Well, it's a loss of
Mm.
identity and purpose and time and what are they going to do and like all
Sure.
this other stuff to be able to talk with them about that. And the third area is where I think the real promise, is looking at some and developing some research. So, like, it's like in this particular context, how do people react to a 20% drawdown in the market, or when they have their first kid, or when they sell a business? Like, what can we do to look at these different things that are happening to help?
Life stages.
Yeah, life stages, external and internal changes, and is there something that we can offer folks as essentially coaches in many instances to help them make as close to a rational decision as possible for them and their needs and their goals. And I will add, one thing that I was very concerned about, but it has been addressed, and it is like we're not used car salesmen or cigarette salesmen. We're not trying to like trick anybody. We're here like we do well if you do well. And so I love the
Mhm.
fact that our intent,
That's pretty good alignment.
yeah, and you know, it's nice, right? Like, what are your goals? You wanna provide for your kids? Great, here's how you do it. You wanna, like, spend all your money and leave your kids nothing? It's your choice. Here's how you do it. Um, Not a lot of
So,
people do it.
you're done at work, you're headed home. Tell me when you and your wife get, good babysitting services available and you're gonna go out for some entertainment, where do you like to go?
Unfortunately, I feel like it's not as often as it should be, but we usually try to incorporate a walk and some dinner, not too heavy, so, we both enjoy, especially this time of year when you can be outside. Um, if it's, leaning towards my decision, I love a jazz club. Uh, you know, New York is I feel like there aren't as many easy, cheap jazz clubs as there used to be, but there's plenty of
No,
music.
for sure there aren't.
Um, and hopefully that a time to catch up. We try to be intentional of, you know, there's always business in a relationship, especially when you have kids, but to take a little
Mhm.
silly time for silliness, in addition to the business.
There's some good shows over at the City Winery.
Yeah, been there many times. Although, who do we see? We saw, I think it was G Love and Special Sauce. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but I remember sitting
No.
sitting up there. We had seats up at the in the high level, looking down, going,
Yeah, that's very nice
"It's
there.
nice." It was lovely, but I remember looking around, thinking, "Wow, why did all these people bring their parents?" They can't come up here. Luckily,
That would be
yeah,
me.
well, it was me too at the time, and my wife was kind enough not to literally hold up a mirror to me. Um,
We, Michael Dorf owns a city winery. He's a real good guy. We do lots of stuff over there. And, I saw him just about a year ago, and he was telling me, "Oh, we just had a great situation here on a Sunday night." "What's that?" "Well, Coldplay was in town to do a concert, and they asked if they couldn't use our club for a warm-up, so on a Sunday night." Yeah, I said, "Michael, I love Coldplay. My whole family loves Coldplay. I took the whole family, that summer to see Coldplay over at MetLife Stadium. Uh, why didn't you call me?" He said, "Well, I had no idea you were a Coldplay fan." I said, "Well, what was it like?" He goes, "Well, they asked to use my conference room, and he said Chris Martin sort of sat in his seat, but not really. He just sort of hovered over the seat, bouncing up and down, and just sort of like humming to himself." He says, "I was watching someone work themselves into a trance." And then he says he goes out on stage, and he's absolutely captivating. I said, "We had a chance to go see Coldplay at an intimate setting like City Winery, and we missed it." So Michael knows now, should that ever happen again, put up the bat signal. We're on our way.
well, look, there's a promise of AI is that you don't have to rely upon Michael reaching out and saying, "Do you like Coldplay?" Somehow, like, your interest,
Finally, a good
like,
application.
the electric zapper is a positive zapper in that case.
So, any comedy really tickling you right now?
Um, I'm not as in touch with it as I was when I was fully ingrained, so I'm hesitant to
Sure.
point out um, there's a woman named Maria Bamford who's been around forever, fantastic characters that she does, uh, I've fallen in love, I'm not the only one, with Bill Burr. I
I only discovered him because of
yeah,
YouTube in the last year.
I saw him in Glengarry Glen Ross as an actor, but I'm a Massachusetts guy and he's a Massachusetts guy, and he has that gruff exterior.
Geez, I could hardly tell.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, you can't tell for him, certainly. But underneath that gruff, I always thought of him more as like this gruff sort of Boston comic, but he's got a fabulous depth to what he does now. Um, I kind of feel like anybody who was
I like Jim Gaffigan too.
I mean, all these guys, they're all different flavors. So one of the things I loved about,
They really are.
a prop comic is
But
not
the
for me.
depth of talent out there.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Look, like anything, you sift through it. There are people who, because they have a billion Instagram followers, get to a show and they don't have the depth. But anyone that's been around in the game and sort of worked it out and now is filling up big venues, they're doing that for a reason, and then they have some quality, even if it's not your taste.
Well, speaking of depth, Jeff Kreisler, you sure have depth, and I'm so intrigued by your career. I've enjoyed getting to know you, hearing your story. Thanks for sharing your story with us today. I can't wait to see, when the next JPMorgan event I get invited to that you're gonna speak at, I'll be in the front row, with popcorn in hand.
I love it. Thank you so much for having me, and this is a wonderful platform you have. So I appreciate you allowing me to spend some time with you and your listeners.